Last April, Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan was celebrating the fact that his country had overtaken South Africa to become the continent's largest economy. 10 months on, just weeks away from a general election, he faces a financial crisis fueled by a plunge in oil prices and a growing security threat as the militant Islamists of Boko Haram continue to spread fear and chaos in the north of the country. With me here to discuss the challenges facing Nigeria as it heads into the general election are Emad Mostaque of emerging markets consultants Ecstrat and William Wallis, the FT's African affairs writer. Those are two huge issues for a country to be facing at any time, but which do you think is going to be the decisive one in this election?
I think the decisive issue will probably be the security threat posed by Boko Haram, because ultimately, if you look at previous voting patterns in Nigeria, we're already heading into a very tight race, and this may actually be decided by up to 1 million voters who can't vote in the northeast of the country because of the Boko Haram security threat and their active targeting of elections.
Would you agree with that, William?
Well, I think the tendency in Nigerian elections is for people to vote along religious and ethnic lines, partly. So, and also, of course, the ruling party has a real kind of political machine that will determine also, to an extent, how people vote. But I think that both the economic difficulties and Boko Haram and the need to have leadership at the top to rebuild the army and rebuild the state finances are both critical issues.
You've described the threat posed by Boko Haram as a jihadist cancer and written extensively about that, but how much do you think the government of Goodluck Jonathan is going to sort of bear the blame or be seen to be responsible for having allowed this situation to develop as it has?
It's incredibly difficult for the government of Goodluck Jonathan because this comes about largely due to the structural issues with poverty in Nigeria, creating a bit of a vacuum up there. And also, due to the transition to civilian rule from military rule, the army has always been somewhat neglected and actually feared. I mean, in fact, one of the key interesting elements here is that Buhari is a former military leader coming in.
Buhari is the leader of the opposition.
Leader of the opposition. He's actually a former military leader coming in. So there is a bit of a reluctance to make the army too strong. So some of the blame can be placed there, but ultimately this has almost taken on a life of its own. And now it's at a very dangerous stage of its formation where it might start spreading to neighbouring countries.
But I think there is this perception, particularly in the north of the country, that this is a government that neglected this problem, allowed it to escalate, and that actually at different points was partly because of their communications policy and their failings there, was rather indifferent to the fate of the people suffering most as a result of the insurgency.
I mean, there have been people who've even said that even in recent months that actually they've been quite indifferent to specific cases that have generated huge attention worldwide.
Well, certainly with that was the case with the kidnapping of more than 200 schoolgirls in the northeast of the country in a remote place called Chibok, and then subsequently in more recently when there was a horrific massacre in the town of Baga, at roughly the same time as the Paris attacks, and there was very little attention paid by the government to what was going on in Nigeria.
Sure. In fact, I think on the Baga attack, the government claimed only 150 people died, and they took a week to do it versus an immediate condemnation of Charlie Hebdo.
I'd like to move on just now to the other issue that we discussed, the economy, and obviously the currency is weakening quite significantly, but also the oil price on which Nigeria depends for a lot of its exports and a lot of its revenues. I mean, what is the opposition offering as an alternative prospectus, let's put it that way?
I mean, the opposition policy is based on a cleaning up of the corruption that is endemic within Nigeria. I mean, we see a massive gap between official NNPC, the National Petroleum Company, invoices and receipts. I mean, there are literally tens of billions of dollars that go missing. They are limited to what they can do. You can see the Central Bank of Nigeria effectively has stopped raising rates at the moment. Their reserves are coming down to parlous levels. They might even run a current account deficit, something that would have been unimaginable a year ago.
William, I mean, you've written about this quite closely.
Well, I think, yes, it is interesting that in the early 80s something rather similar happened. You had an oil boom, and then once the oil price collapsed, it showed the degree of waste that had been going on in government. I think, and actually, interestingly, that's when General Buhari, the main opposition leader, came to power in a military coup. One significant thing in this election is that you've had a tremendous oil boom in recent years, and the government has failed comprehensively to build up savings. And in fact, even during the boom, some parts of the boom, you had a depreciating currency. So I think, that said, neither side has really addressed the issue of how they're going to rescue the state finances.
Just finally, who would you say I know the Nigerian business community is very diverse and very large, but who would they be tending towards?
I think the northern businessmen think their time has come, especially after the lack of handover between the south and north that usually happened in the last elections, because whoever's incumbent tends to favour their local allies more than anyone else. So I'd say the north favours the north and the south favours the south.
I'd say it was considerably more nuanced than that, and that there are businessmen who have real vested interests in this particular administration who are very nervous about the prospects of an opposition victory, and they actually are from both north and south. But then there are also business people who are very worried about the way the economy has been managed under this present regime, and are more confident that an administration run by General Buhari would tighten up.
William Wallis, Emad Mostaque, thank you both very much. For more on this and other topics covered by our analysis team, please go to ft.com/analysis.